For the event tonight, this was a series that I wanted to put together. I've traveled, for those of you who do or do not know, my previous life in the steampunk community, I was known as Dr. Grimm. And Dr. Grimm is part of the woven into the story here of the Havishams and the Curiopori. Now, when I used to travel to do steampunk and cosplay conventions, I used to go out there, and at first it was just kind of talking about how I make my art. And I was very limited in the things that I would share. And after a while, I took a hiatus and my life kind of went downhill, and I ended up back in the scene after a hiatus. And then I started to do this series, Finding Art Through Trauma. It was something that I had never actually done before, and it was something that was very raw and very personal. Going into a convention and not playing a character was something that was very different for me, because for some of you, you only know me as characters. You don't know me necessarily as the artist. Now, I feel very comfortable performing as the Grinch or Beetlejuice or any number of characters because I'm wearing a mask. And for years, that was my comfort zone. I was more comfortable wearing makeup and a mask and performing that way than I was in my own face, or even in my own skin. And there are reasons for that, which I'm going to go into in this series. But when I stepped back into the art field and into the steampunk realm, and I opened up, it was because I had kind of reached rock bottom. To be honest, to go out on the road and meet with strangers they see that title, Finding Art Through Trauma. I didn't know who was going to show up in that room at any given moment. I thought maybe 4 or 5 people might show up. And as it turned out, to any convention that I did go to and spoke about my life personally and directly and why I'm still standing here today, I was walking into rooms of 30 to 40 people to 100 people sometimes, and it was overwhelming. And I felt like I needed to. I felt like it was part of my therapy, just like my art is. And let's face it, fear is a big part of everyone's life. We live it every day. We're all living it right now. And in part, that's why Nathan and I built the Curiopori. It's to confront it. It's to confront your fears. It's to add a little bit of humor to it, to add some humility to it, so that you can get past it. Because it's always been one of those things that I felt like it's okay to be afraid, but you can't let it change who you are. And there was a time that I let it change who I was. And I ended up in a very bad place. And if it wasn't for confronting that fear and learning how to find the art that's inside of me and keep it going through the trauma, through the darkness, then I wouldn't still be standing here. So I put together that series because I felt like there's an audience for it. There's a huge audience for it. Right now, the world is engulfed in fear, and there have been people over the past 2 years who never understood what depression is that now understand it. The pandemic, I was born for that, and many others were too. Because when it happened, as difficult as it was, we are still thriving through it because we've been in that dark place before that no one understood. And now the playing field is leveled, and we get to experience this together. About 6 months ago, I joined TikTok, which I said I would never join. And the audience there, who hopefully some will show up to watch this, have been so open about their problems, their darkness, the things they've experienced. This year has been difficult for me. I've had difficult points in my life. For those of you who know me, I will be talking about some of those things. I should probably say ahead of time, trigger warning, that I will be talking about self-harm, suicide, things like that, because it is part of my story, and I can't really escape that. My life has always been about being in control, and I'd like to think that I was in control 99% of the time about everything else except my own choices. I could help anyone if they were lost, if they were stuck in the dark. I had a way to figure out their problems, to look at things a different way, to help them be in a better place. But when it came to me, I could not see how to do it. My art became the tangible outlet of the darkness that's inside of me. And that's how I figured out how to unlock it, and that's what I'm going to be discussing throughout this series. Because you can't go back and be the person that you were before. I don't know if you've heard that before, but if you haven't, I'm telling you. Lots of people feel like if I could just be that person I used to be. Well, you're not going to be, because you evolved. You evolved to a different place because of the hard things that you've been through. And that is what life is about. It's not about going backwards and finding who you were as a kid. It's about finding what frightened you as a kid and how you moved forward. Now, I am one of those people who've come across obstacles just like anybody else. Everybody has obstacles on a daily basis and throughout their life. I'm going to talk about some of those obstacles here, because it was something that I wrote into the lore of Dr. Grimm. And for those who do or do not know Dr. Grimm has been a huge part of my life. He's kind of been the therapy for me since I was a teenager, when I was writing stories about these weird things that I wanted to build, specifically brains in jars, and how to bring the memory of people back to life. That's been a theme throughout my life. And Dr. Grimm, I created as this character out of abuse from my childhood. I created a character that would be the bad guy against the bad guys. And this is when I was about 14, 15. I created Dr. Grimm to be a bully against the bullies. He would be karma. He would be the person that I wasn't strong enough to be on the outside. And I simply would write him into stories and make these outrageous machines that would get back at people who deserved it. I did not realize at that time that I would then live that life, that I would then create this character and bring him into our world and bring him into my artwork in such a way that I have. Behind me is a control panel. This is a literal representation. This entire machine behind me that I'll be showing you and talking about is the embodiment of Dr. Grimm, of the things that I thought were important in life. Having control. And so I built a control panel. This control panel is something that I keep in my head to be able to, well, keep the darkness at bay. You see, I'm also an empath. If you don't know what an empath is, the simplest form is that you feel the things that other people feel. And I've been like that my entire life. I did not know the name for it at the time. I just knew that I felt things that I wasn't sure were my feelings. Now, the trick about being an empath, and a good friend of mine for many years said that I was sort of a black hole for negative energy, which was a very good description, because bad things always seem to happen around me. And for a while, I thought that was the universe's way of, well, condemning me, that I deserved it. And that's not necessarily it. I would feel the negative feelings of other people, and I would draw them in. I'd know when my friends were hurt, when they were sad, when they were angry. Never the good things, just the bad. And those things just sort of dwelled inside of me. And eventually I turned them into art. How that works is what I'm going to attempt to talk about in this series. Because it's not just about having control, it's about having and listening to the choices that you actually have, the things that you are actually in control of, rather than the things that you think you're in control of. And that is something that when you come to see this story that we've created, that's what the story is all about. What are you actually in control of in your life? The next part of this machine deals with your mind, which is something that I'm going to be talking about as well. The secrets of your mind, which are this weird, vast universe that people try to unlock. I've been trying to work on understanding how my mind works since I was a kid, because I was always the strange one, the weird one. And that's okay. I know that now, but I didn't then. I started writing a book called The Demon Project. And it was based on dreams that I had that I didn't understand. And it's taken me till today to still work on that story. I brought it to life somewhat here at the Curioporium, but it's a very big part of my life. And that is also something I'm going to talk about. Because what it is training your brain not to look at things the way that you were taught, but to be able to turn things in a different direction, to look at them more positively. Everybody can do it. They just don't know how to. When you turn things and look at things from a different perspective, they become something completely different. They become tangible, they become approachable, they become something that you can fix. One of the first things I wrote in the words of Dr. Grimm many years ago was that you are not defined by the walls that surround you. You are defined by what you imagine beyond those four walls and how to get there. And I wrote that when I was younger, when I was a teenager. It's been something of a motto for me because I had to get through my own obstacles. I had to get past how I thought my brain was broken, but more so it just had to be rewired. Different wires plugged into your brain in different ways make you think differently. If you think that you're broken, you think you have to fix yourself. If you think that you just need to tweak the wiring a bit, that becomes a much more approachable way to look at you. Because we aren't broken. We just think differently based on the things that have happened to us. And so when you start to look at things from a different perspective, you're able to change those things. So an example of an obstacle that I dealt with since I was a kid. If any of you have seen my art, besides the stuff that's here, which is two-dimensional, I do two-dimensional, three-dimensional, computer graphics, all sorts of things. And if you were to take a look at my website, Grimm Studios, you would see that I use a lot of color. I love color. Color is something different to me than it is to other people. Even in the darkest and, well, grimmest things that I build, there is color. But I can't see any of it. Ever since I was a kid, my world is in black and white. I am completely colorblind. And it took many years to figure that out, just because of my childhood. But I don't know what colors look like. I know what colors feel like. Now, I've known I wanted to be an artist since I was a little kid. And I used to draw and color and all these things, and I may not have used the right colors for things, but It's what made me me. And my art, it made my art unique. So to live a life where you don't understand what colors are, but you want to be an artist, most people would give up right there. And I almost did at points. But to me, the easiest way to understand that obstacle is I'm an empath. And so when I found out that things actually, like I knew I could feel energy from color, I just didn't understand it. So throughout my life, I started asking people, when they would say, for instance, what color is the sunset? The sunset's beautiful. You can't imagine in words what this color looks like. Fuchsias and golds and burning oranges. So I would ask people, well, what color is it? And they would tell me what colors were in the sunset. And then I would say, well, how does it make you feel? And they would tell me. When people say what their favorite color is, and you ask them why, they have to think about why that color is important to them. What does it mean to them? Because it's a feeling, not a number. So over the years, and asking many, many, many people, what is that color? How does it make you feel? I kind of built up a chart in my head, a Rolodex, if you're old school, of what colors mean to different people. And to some people, those colors mean the same thing. And so I would know red means this, yellow means this. And then I would alter it, because obviously the rainbow of colors is vast and beautiful, and people see colors differently because they feel colors differently, because they have memories of things. And so that makes it a little trickier. So to become a professional artist, none of my clients ever know right away that I'm colorblind. Because when I meet with them and they want me to work on a certain project, whether it's something that's steampunk or whether it's two-dimensional and it's a poster or whatever it is, I ask them questions. I ask them very important questions such as, well, how do you want your audience to feel? What is your favorite color and why? The the questions that I ask them relate to how I am going to project what they feel, especially in the moment, and give them what they want. Because as an empath, I'm not only curious about the questions, I'm feeling what they feel when they think about that color. And that's a very different thing. If you can sit in the room and ask somebody what their favorite color is, and they can see it in the room, and they can feel what it feels like to them, then I can feel it too. And I've learned that. I've learned to unlock that. So that when I give them their final project, and they're like, oh, the colors are beautiful on this. And then I work with them more and more they will say, well, I love how you cast the colors of the reds here, and the blues here, the teals and patinas on your creations. And then I will let them know what my secret is. My secret typically is that, well, I can't see it at all, but I'm glad you can. So, that is one of the obstacles I had to overcome. Not once, but twice. Because at one point in my life, I had an incident, a trauma, due to a medical issue where I was unalived due to a medical condition. Briefly, but they brought me back. And when they brought me back, guess what had to get rewired? Everything about my brain. The things that I used to be able to do, like I used to be able to draw really well, but I couldn't sculpt as well, suddenly got reversed. I didn't understand why. I used to be able to play piano. Now I can't. I used to be able to type very quickly. Now I can't. But I can do other things. It was because, and at that moment that I realized, it wasn't because my brain broke, it was because it got rewired. And suddenly I had a new power, a new talent. So I either dwell in the moment that, oh, I can't do these things as well anymore, but why? Because now I can do these things. And yes, there were moments where I felt sorry for myself, I was upset, and you can't do that. You cannot go down that dark rabbit hole into the why. It's because you want the control that you really don't have control over. And I understand that now. So I had to reteach my brain what color meant again by asking people, what do these colors mean to you? And some of it was still in there and it just had to get unlocked, but it changed. My style changed of how I draw, of how I create, of how I think, and for the most part, that is a good thing. But there were times that I looked at it as not a good thing. Because it was frustrating. The frustrations that we have as people, I mean, we're all living it right now. And you can't let it define you. And I did for a while. So, the other thing that I want to talk about in this series is all of those things that, well, you've all heard the phrase that, well, I wear many hats in my job. Inside, I wear many hats. Outside, I wear many hats and masks because that's who I am as a performer. But I didn't realize that all of the different tasks that I had to play, all the different parts I had to play inside of me were like wearing different hats. And I did have control over that. I just felt like I did. So to go through the list of having childhood trauma from abuse, from not being able to see color, not too bad, from being bullied, which many people are, from having anxiety, from having PTSD, from loss of people very close to me. It's been one thing after another, and that's typically how it goes in anyone's life, most people's lives. Some people escape it. But artists, it kind of latches onto them. I don't know whether the universe just directs that energy at people or not. I feel like it does. I mean, clearly you've got people like Edgar Allan Poe and Van Gogh who somehow found a way through their vices, through their misery, through their pain to create because they had a talent. And, well, they weren't alive for very long. The things that they created while they were here are now things that we look up to as artists, things that we can't imagine what they went through to have to create that. Having those many hats that I wear inside, I've learned that, well, I'm very literal. For anybody who knows me. Later in life, I found out that I was autistic. And that's one of the reasons I am so literal. The hat of Dr. Grimm took a place in my life for many years. It was the thing that I had to put on to become the character. It would change my demeanor, it would change how I walked, how I talked. But it gave me some sort of power, some sort of control, some sort of way to stand up for myself. I realized that if I could just find the hats that I needed to wear on the inside to deal with the trauma, to deal with the abuse, the depression, the anxiety, to literally find the hat that I need to wear inside when those different things bubble to the surface, and demand my attention to the point where they bring me out of the real world and sink me into a place of darkness. I didn't have those hats. I didn't have the control panel. I didn't have any of that. All I had was all the darkness that lived inside of me, that some of it didn't even belong to me because I was an empath. And because I was autistic and I didn't know it, I just looked at the world differently than everybody else. I mean, when I was a kid, that wasn't even a term, right? And now it is. Finding out late in life that you're autistic because your son was diagnosed as being autistic, well, that changes everything. It made it, giving it a name meant that there was a way to control it. And I've been dealing with that for about 10, 12 years. Learning what autism means, what it means to different people, how it affects different people. Again, it doesn't mean that I'm broken. It just gave me some sort of control over knowing, well, I can rewire that. That's a learned behavior. And it took many years of therapy to be able to come to that place. That was about six years ago. Before that time, it was not that easy. Everything was just kind of a jumbled mess. Chaos is one of those things that I struggle with. It's one of my demons. It's part of my demon project. And I'm going to talk about all of that probably in our third session, because we have to get there first. Our demons that we fight with every day, everybody has them. Some people ignore them. Some people don't know what to do with them. They just want them to go away. And like I said before, if you think that you can go back to who you were before, it's not going to happen. The demons that are with you are part of you, from the way that I've looked at it. So you need to find a way to communicate with them. The communication to your demons means that, well, it comes down to having a talent, I guess. And I probably should have prefaced all of this with that. I want you, whoever is watching this, to understand everybody has a talent. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean an artistic talent. I mean that everybody has something that is unique to them, that only they can do. And because they have it and others don't, whether it be as an artist, writing music, writing poetry, painting, building, but there's other talents out there. There's the talent to help people. There's the talent to listen to people, to care, to have empathy. There's talents in sports. There's talents in mechanics. There's talents. Everyone has a talent, but the ones that are unseen are the ones that people ignore. I've had plenty of people say to me, I do not have a talent. And I try to prove them wrong by the fact that they help other people before they help themselves. And a lot of people who are going to watch this are going to realize that if you have the capability of helping other people, then that means that you can help yourself. It just means that you don't care enough to. And that was something that came to me that I didn't fully understand. And it was something that once I realized what it meant, it began to make my life a little more stable. It began to give me kind of a common ground with other people. It gave me a way to find control over the things that I only thought I did. So, what is your talent? That's the thing you have to find. And I do not want to hear that you don't have one. I want you to think about the thing that you do best, even if you don't see it. Because 9 times out of 10, people are telling you to your face, and you don't want to listen. And if there's one thing that you need to learn about this, is that if you expect other people to listen to the care and empathy that you have for them to help them, but you aren't doing it for yourself, then you're not using your talent on the most important person there is. And if you did, you've unlocked at least the slow path to fixing those parts of you that you don't like, those demons. Because you just have to light that spark inside of you to get it to illuminate a little. So, I think everybody out there who watches this is going to find a way to do that. That is why I've been working on this book, The Demon Project, for years. Not only as an art book, but as a self-help guide, if you will. Just using art and demons and steampunk and science fiction. Because it became a very big part of my life once I understood, well, I have a talent, I was born with it, and I always knew it was there, and I didn't question it. But other people, it was hiding behind a curtain. And you can only hide things behind a curtain so long before they get revealed. If not to you, then to other people. What's hiding behind that curtain, though you may think it's dark, may be beautiful and an inspiration to someone else. I know that I'm being very literal in how I'm talking, and understand that that's how my brain understands things. That is how my worlds get created. It is how I unlock the art that's inside of me. By being weird, by being dark. I had somebody on TikTok just yesterday say, I write dark poetry, but I never show it to anyone because I'm afraid they'll think that I'm frightening, that they will lock me in an insane asylum. And that made me very sad. If you have art inside of you, if you have a talent and you're not using it to show other people, then you're not inspiring other people, because that's what art is. Art is there not only as an outlet for us to be the people and show the things that are inside of us, but they're there to inspire other people to make art, to find their talent. So if you don't show your art, which that's a huge problem with artists and with people who don't think they have a talent. I can't put myself out there. How vulnerable is it? What if people don't like it? What if people think I'm strange? Does it really matter what people think about your art? If it lives inside of you and it's found its way out, then that means it has to be out here somewhere. And the reason it needs to be out here is to inspire someone else to find the art inside of them, find their talent. And I've been saying that for years. So this person on TikTok, I simply said, I've got 3 words for you. Edgar Allan Poe, who wrote not only dark and disturbing stories, especially for the time that he lived in, but beautiful poetry. And more people know him for the dark side of him than they do for the journalistic things that he's done or the poetry that he's written. So if people are afraid of those things, if they have a fear of that darkness inside of them, why do they gravitate towards Poe? Is it because secretly they are inspired by it? Is it because they realize that someone else has that inside of them and it's not just them? So maybe they're not so alone. And that's really what it comes down to, it, right? Not being alone. When you feel alone and you stay by yourself inside your head, then you do it physically, and that's when you end up in the dark place where you do not want to share who you are or what your talents are. Although some people use that to reach out, and that's the only way they can. Which means they're capable of it. So, we are just checking the time. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of this. Each one of these are going to keep to about an hour, but I want to leave 15 minutes where people can ask questions. And because this is live, and I'm not sure when we transfer this recording over if the questions are going to be there, I will answer your question with your question in it so people can learn with you. But the other thing that I wanted to mention that is important is I've spoken a lot about mental health for years. It was about 6 years ago that I sought out the help because I finally understood that I needed it, but more importantly, that I deserved it. I've always been afraid of fixing that part of me. And as it turns out, it's because I thought I didn't deserve to be happy. And that simply comes from a misunderstanding of the word happy. But that's for another part of the series. I will say, honestly, here in this, that about 6 years ago, I did try to unalive myself. And the universe made it not work. That's the best way to put that. So I'm still here. But what led me to that place was not understanding, well, that I wasn't broken. That I deserved the love that I send out to other people, the empathy that I put out to other people, and all of that is in my art, first and foremost. There was a time when I did not enjoy anything that I made, anything I created. And let me be clear about that, because any artist will say, well, I didn't like that. It wasn't what I really wanted it to be, but I put it out there anyway. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that I would create something, so it was here, and then I just moved on. There was no joy from creating it. I guess that's why I always felt that the art just needed to be here, that I couldn't hide my art, that I couldn't, for some reason, my brain would not allow me to go down that pretentious road that, oh, what if they don't like my art? And that's something that a lot of artists struggle with. For me, it was, I just need it out of my head so I can make more stuff. I didn't realize that was part of who I am as an artist. But it was something that I could cultivate, that I could change, that I could help others with. Creating the darkness that is who I am into something tangible became something of therapy for me. Right? I'll explain it like this. Depression sent me down that road that made me do the thing that I said I would never do. Depression is like a demon inside of me, right? And through my therapy and through working with my therapist, and more importantly, working with EMDR, which is like magic in some ways, I learned that if I could take and visualize tangibly depression, not as a darkness that came over me every once in a while that made me not want to get off the couch, not the darkness that made me do the thing that I did not want to do, not just a darkness, the darkness, a creature, a tangible, inky, sinewy thing. I created the darkness into a tangible creature. Why? So I could have a conversation with him. Through EMDR, I learned that inside your subconscious, you can have a conversation with your own subconscious. Okay? Go with that for a second. That means that the things that you are creating as an artist, the things that are your talent, are tangible. Even the things that aren't artistic, necessarily. The way that you help people, the way that you care. If you don't think that it physically helps someone, then you're not paying attention to your own physical attributes with your depression, your anxiety, your sadness, your loneliness. All of it casts itself onto you physically. That means that it's here, that it's real. And so if you then are creative in a different way, if you look at it in a different way, that your anxiety, your loneliness, your sadness, if you turn it into something you can have a conversation with, then that means you can get some sort of control over it when you never thought that you could. Because it can be reasoned with, it can be dealt with here and now. So there was, at that point, when I didn't want to be here anymore, and I followed the actions to not be here anymore, I realized when I came out of that darkness that I never wanted to be in that place again. And the only thing that was going to save me, the only thing that I've ever really had control over was my talent. It's the one thing that it's me without having to change it. It just wants to come out. It just wants to be here. And I can't help that. So it's no different than the sadness, than the depression, than the loneliness that people face. It is a tangible thing. And when you learn that, it's a game changer. That means that you can reason with those things, look at them a different way, and turn them into something that's going to help you. And hopefully, as we go through this series, and I explain that a little bit more, especially with the Demon Project and how I learned to pick that apart and make it so. I am going to show examples as well of some of my work, and I will explain, even here at the Curioporium, these things that I have built, that I have had a hand in, some of the story points that are here, that have blended so well with Nathan's story and his love for history and artifacts, and like, it was so cool to be able to find somebody like that, that's like so detail oriented like I am, that, well, that's how I learned how to be me, without apology. And I feel like other people can do it too. And this was a way that with this pandemic, I could have either sunk into my depression from working a crappy job that was killing my soul, from being around people before that who didn't believe in me. I found a way through my art to surround myself with people who care and love me, for finding a job at the thing I'm really good at, which is helping people. And in the middle of a pandemic, I went to Nathan with this crazy idea that I have had for years on my own of this creating this world that you could go into and tell a story and make people part of the story. And Nathan was in the middle of closing this place down, which I knew was his baby too, and I just didn't want to see it go away. And so I came to him with this, expecting him to say, that's awesome, but no, because pandemic and money. But no, he believed in me. And I tell you, I don't have a lot of people in my life from before that 6 years that did believe in me. Very few friends that have been lifelong friends, but it's very, very few. And slowly I've been turning that around and realizing that there are people out there that if I just share my vision, no matter how crazy it is, no matter how dark it is, like a corpse and a piano, somebody out there will get you. And the right people get you. That's all that matters about your art. That's all that matters about how you live. And so that is what's important. And that's what I'm going to talk about. Because that's what Dr. Grimm taught me. Don't apologize for being you. So, I can see if anybody types in any questions. I know there's very few people here, but hopefully more people will watch it. And I hope that you will come back for the other 3 parts of this and that it is somewhat helpful or entertaining. But if there are questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. I see that someone had commented, Donna Hall had commented, when I was talking about your brain being rewired. She said not rewired, I believe it's understanding how we learn, and that is absolutely true. I mean, that's the thing I learned with being autistic. I just learn differently. That's how I've always been. But to me, that is a way of rewiring. So, what is my favorite color? Kathleen Watts asks. Besides black, which is all colors, dark red. Dark red is there's something powerful, dark, and beautiful about it. So like a crimson red has always been my favorite color. And the combination of black and red has always been kind of my color scheme, which I then, as a fashion statement, gave to Dr. Grimm, which I happen to be wearing now, coincidentally. Miranda. How did I start to honestly accept that my art was amazing and believe others when they tell you and you don't believe it? You know, when somebody said that they loved my art, it wasn't that I didn't believe them. It was just that it didn't make me happy. And again, that comes down to understanding what the word happy actually means to me. And I've always had a love-hate relationship with that word. There was one of my favorite costumes that I've ever built was the Harvester, which was a steam-powered scarecrow. And I went out to film it with one of my favorite photographers, Jill, and she took me out into the forest, and she took a bunch of pictures, and then she wanted to do a video. And so she shot me coming across this bridge over a river in the costume. It was just 20 seconds. Now, when I make a creature like that, and I'm going to talk about that in part of the series, every creature that I make is a trauma that I went through. So when I pull it out of my head and make it into a tangible creature, and I'm talking about down to its backstory, the sound effects that it makes, because it has all of that, because I'm crazy, so it has lights and sound and whatever. It's a trauma as a monster. When I was a kid, my mother always told me I was a monster. And to me, monsters were the things that were good, that were Well, similar to how Guillermo del Toro thinks, in that monsters aren't the bad guys. Humans are. Monsters are organic and they protect what is natural. So I looked at monsters a little bit differently, except for myself. So all of these monsters I was creating were parts of me. And eventually I had to turn that way of thinking around, that I wasn't the monster. Someone else was. So when I watched that creature in the video for that 20 seconds, when I'm in a costume and I'm performing, I think I know what it looks like on the outside, in its movements and its all the little things that I'm doing, because it's a puppet too, that creature. And I was hoping it looked that way on the outside, but rarely do you get to see that. And when I saw that video, that was the first time I saw something that I made that I appreciated. Not that I was happy about, that I appreciated, which is much better. So I do believe people when they say that they love my artwork, and it means the world to me. Just for the longest time, I didn't feel anything from it. I can feel as an empath what they feel and know that they were telling the truth. And that's a different thing. But very rarely do I have the pride in my artwork that I think a lot of artists do. And honestly, this has replaced that in my head. Because where else, I mean, the gratitude that I have for Nathan to be able to team up with him to build this is, I don't have words for it, because I got to do something that's me and appreciate how it looks. Like being able to draw some of the things that are in this room and send him sketches and say, this is how I want to build this, and then it turns into that. I've always had an appreciation that I can draw something that's made out of found objects, even though I don't have the found objects, and then make it by finding those objects wherever they are and bringing them as they call to each other to build something like this. My favorite medium, Donna asked, my favorite media, I don't know that I have. I love sculpting because it's very therapeutic. It's something that before, when I was talking about that I used to draw better than I could sculpt, there was something about, I always wanted to be able to sculpt three-dimensionally. I mean, that's why I build what I build. That's why I do what I do, because, I went to California Institute of the Arts, which is the Disney College, and I went there for animation. Like for years as a kid, I was like, I want to be an animator. And then I got there and I'm like, I don't want to be an animator. But somehow I was turned on to theme parks. And then that clicked, because I've always wanted to create worlds that you could step into, that you could escape into, because that's what I desperately did as a child. With any book that I read or movie, I obsessed on it. And that was part of the autism too, is the hyper focus of that world and all the details of it that I loved. And so I wanted to create things like that too. And meeting somebody like Nathan, like I said, that is also detail oriented, that's why when you come here, you can see things and come again and again and see so many things. I mean, that's how we both do art. It's the little details behind it. So in essence, yes, it started with assemblage. Steampunk art was something that before I knew a word for steampunk, I really gravitated towards the work of Mary Shelley and Jules Verne in their books, and realizing that in a realistic way, which then turned into the word steampunk, but that's not what it was previously. It was just Victorian science fiction or whatever it is. So I do enjoy finding pieces of things and bringing them together and then fabricating other things that merge them so that they are form and function. Like this whole machine not only looks cool, or at least I think it does, but it also works. And it's a seance machine. So I like sculpting and I like doing things like that. Miranda, let's see. How did I start to honestly... Oh, no, I already read that. Hold on. What are they going backwards? I'm working on it here. I'm scrolling. Why would I do this? Okay. Feeling others' feelings is different than your own. I'm so happy you're now living this adventure and sharing it with us. It's so inspiring. Thank you, Miranda. I appreciate that. Do I find sculpting meditative? Yes, I do actually. Sculpting I can get lost in. If you've ever, like on YouTube, sometimes I'll film my sculpting. I love doing it. Like I'll put on a movie and I'll sculpt for hours and I just get lost in sculpting. There's something about it that I just find so relaxing in that I'm physically creating, it's like building stuff like this out of things is a different type of thing, but sculpting, like actually hand sculpting things, there's nothing like that. To just have a lump of clay and then turn it into something else is pretty amazing. Let's see. Why won't it get me to? That's why I love steampunk and why I love to make the old new again. Yes. Assemblage, yeah. I think steampunk is essentially assemblage, depending on how you do it. One of the books that I was fortunate enough to put out, 1,000 Steampunk Creations, that book, a lot of it is assemblage art, and I think there are artists out there that are really good at that, but then there's the form and function of it, and adding lights and levers and things like that, and that's when it turns into this whole other level. I think there's definitely a difference between steampunk and assemblage art. I don't know where that line is. Well, I do know where that line is, and it's the design and the materials, but they're a little bit different. I still enjoy them both. Okay. Julia, I don't do visual arts often because my talents don't run that way, but I find the visual more contemplative, and I find it easier to get into my own head while doing visual arts as opposed to written arts. Yes. Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Like, how is your art finding its way out into the world? However it does that. Again, it's your talent just trying to manifest itself out here. It doesn't matter how you do it, So finding that and finding what you like, but also then trying different things, because that's the other part of it. When I go and talk to like school groups, which I've done many times, and I love doing that. The other path that I would have chosen is being a teacher. Not specifically today during the pandemic, but I've always wanted to. And being that I got the opportunity to be a long-term substitute teacher this past year during the pandemic, which was difficult and beautiful and wonderful at the same time, while I was building all of this, it was amazing. I don't know where I got the energy from, because I was doing both, but it was amazing. And the thing that I love is that, you talk to kids and it's like the kids are, well, like me, I wanted to be an animator. I didn't understand all the different things that you could do that weren't animation. Costume design and writing and storyboards and character design and color design, all those things. When you look at the movie, when you go to the movies, and I hope I have an appreciation for Marvel films because they've made people sit through the credits. And yes, some of those people are sitting through the credits to see what's coming up next. But it forces them to see how many talented people have to come together to make a thing. Because that is something that I think people take for granted. It's really amazing that you have so many opportunities, and your talent doesn't have to be a physical, it can be a mental. And that's proof of that, right? Because every person on that in the credits of the movie had a part in making this wonderful thing that you enjoyed, or at least made you think, whichever. Let me see. I think I got to the end of the questions here. It's so weird. It's skipping back up, so bear with me here. But writing, see, that's the thing, like writing for me, like I used to enjoy the physical aspect of writing, and I do sometimes. But again, after the incident with the medical thing, like it made it difficult to do. So, but I love storytelling, and that's a whole other thing, right? If you were a good storyteller, you know, good writers and good storytellers are typically, they can be merged great, like Neil Gaiman, but sometimes they live in two different places. I myself am not a wonderful writer, but I am a great storyteller, and when I can do it through my characters and make them come to life, that's pretty fun. And now I get to do that all the time, which is great. We have reached the 8 o'clock mark, so unless there's any other questions, which you can throw in there right away, but if not, I will bring this session to an end. Again, we're going to have a lot more coming up. This 4-part series. The next parts that I'm going into, we're going to be talking about the Demon Project. They're going to go into a little more depth about the breakdown of making the trauma into art, like actually making it tangible, and using examples. And we're also going to go for a little walk in the vault as I talk as well, so we're not just here in this room. But for everyone who joined, thank you very much. We are going to be... I'm going to answer any other questions that come up, after this in the next series as well. But thank you for joining. This was thrown together at the last minute, so whoever is here watching, great. I appreciate you. Whoever's going to watch it, I appreciate you. And we're just going to keep going with this. But like I said, we're going to have lots more coming up. We're going to have more storytelling and talking about our characters here at the Curioporium, and we may learn a little bit about how Dr. Grimm built this machine. We're going to do, hopefully, a lot. Maybe you've learned a little bit about how my brain works, and you're just going to get more of it if you want it, because that's how this works. So thank you again. I will talk to you all soon, and thanks for being here. Take care, everyone.